The 2021 March state election, let's just make this very clear for those tuning in from over East or around the world. We went to that election in March 2021 when Premier Mal Gowan had a popularity rate of 92%. He was Mr. Popularity. They wanted to keep the border closed. That is what the election was about. We had a closed border since March 2020, and then we went to the election in March 2021, and that election was purely about people feeling that they were being kept safe from what we saw happening over East and Victoria and everything happening there. That election was purely about keeping the border closed. That's why Labor won in such a landslide. They won 53 seats in the lower house where government was formed. So they've had absolute majority in there, but also in the upper house. That's what the political landscape looked like back in 2021. Shooters, Fishers and Palmer's party did have Rick Mazza in the upper house. There was a Libertarian in the upper house too, the Honourable Aaron Stonehouse. So before that election, we had a myriad of voices who could talk about firearms with a level of expertise. We went, when I was working for Aaron Stonehouse, and we worked very closely with Rick Mazza on firearms, we went to the government back then and said the WA Firearms Act needs to be looked at. It's from 1973. They had tacked on regulation after regulation after regulation until it became a dog's breakfast. The industry, the organisations, the people wanted to look at it and rewrite it so it would be fit for purpose for everybody. The Labor government back before 2021 said that's not on our agenda this time. We're not looking at firearms. We don't have that to look at. After they won that landslide election in March 2021, by March 2022, the Labor Party came out. It was on the front page of the West Australian newspaper. Jack, you probably have nightmares about this like I do. On the front page of the newspaper here, it's a one-party state. It's a one newspaper state. They printed a map listing the locations of where rifles, shotguns and pistols were stored. The Firearms Registry was directed by Police Minister Paul Papalia to give this information to the media, who released it on the front page of the newspaper saying a gun on every corner. That was the headline. They were whipping up a fear campaign to make people and the community scared about the number of legally held firearms that we had in the community. There's been no issues with gun crime in this state, minimal levels of gun crime. And the crime that we do have is always linked to bikies and drug wars. That's what happens in here in this state. So the government of the day, with the absolute majority, said, we've got our new agenda for firearms. We'll scare people into thinking that the licensed person who owns 10, 20, 30, 50 guns is the one to be scared of. That's what they went out, and that's how they told the public that we are suddenly an issue despite the evidence and the statistics not backing it up. So it was just an onslaught from there. We were attacked in the media. We were smeared in the media. There were stories about guns printed next to bikies using guns. It was honestly one of the biggest propaganda machines I have ever witnessed in my 15 years working in media and politics. So that was back in March 2022. I ran for the Senate at that election because I was disgusted. I ran on a Give Gun Owners a Fair Go, and I just tried to be a voice for shooters in WA. That's all history. Fast forward to March 2025, we are now staring down the barrel of the limits on the number of private property we can own, another gun confiscation program without compensation because they've put things in the regulations that were released before Christmas, and now people are scrambling because they have firearms that is not worth any monetary value because the government has said so. So people are sitting there with collections and thousands of dollars of firearms that is worthless because of the state's laws, and people are genuinely concerned about what are we going to do. Jack, I know that's a bit of a long story, but do you think that this has been the agenda of the Labor government since they won that landslide election? And do you think they have been disingenuous with the people of Western Australia in what they're trying to achieve? Because they've used fear campaigns, they've used misinformation, they're calling lever action semi-autos in the media. What is your view of the Labor government, and why do you think they are doing this to us?
Look, firearms are an easy target. We've got the media, which reports here. Now, anyone who's watching from the United States would be surprised that every time you guys have a shooting, we end up with it in our news. We've had shootings in the United States on the front page of the West Australian saying a school shooting or mass shooting and, all of these things. And it's not until you get to, the actual story that you find out it's not in Australia. So they have been gearing this up, and the media has been gearing this up for quite a long time. We need to remember that this didn't actually only start in 21. The Law Reform Commission Project 105, which was the largest ever, that has like greatest response ever in Australia, was completed in 2016. We had a Labor government in 2017. Now, they could have enacted a whole suite of changes, 156 recommendations, right then and there. And they were, in principle, genuinely very good. It said there should be no limits on firearms. It said that primary producers and pest controllers should be allowed Category D firearms. Suppressors were in the report and saying we should have them. All of these things in there that we all agree with and think we should have, as well as it had stronger penalties for firearms offences, in particular for people who aren't licensed. They could have thrown those in, and it genuinely would have been the sort of thing that would have prevented the Floriette murders, the Motorplex shooting. Nah, that was going to happen. That would have happened with anything. So we actually have Labor inaction on firearms to blame for everything that we've got going on now. That they say, oh, this happened and Liberals didn't do this. They voted against changes that would have prevented these situations. But we've got goldfish for voters, and they've forgotten that, the report's in red. They could have made changes then that would have been very good. It would have led the country. I mean, I always sit there and laugh and think about kangaroos that are bombed out on opium in Tasmania getting slammed by a semi-auto 308 because in Tasmania you're allowed Cat Ds out of all states and territories. Why are they still allowed them? Why can't we have them? I'm still baffled. But no, my taste for the Labor government has never been